All right. If anybody is out there, please go ahead and start by. I'm sorry. Go ahead and refresh your screens if you're hearing my voice and you're not seeing the video move. I'm noticing that there is a slight delay.
All right. If anybody is
All right.
out
If
there,
anybody is out there, please go ahead and start by. Um, All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start this session today. It is a continued session from last time where we were talking a lot about the APM Java application monitoring and manually installing it both into a Linux application as well. On Linux in a Java application as well on Windows in a Java application. So now that you've seen those set up, I would like to kind of pivot over to what we see a lot of nowadays, which is dealing with containerized applications. And now this is going to start covering, some of the best practices and way forward dealing with those types of apps. And we'll touch on a lot of good, how-tos as well, best practices and things towards the end. So, like I said, the agenda, we're going to kind of do a quick overview, understanding what is actually happening and, with both APM and then going into Kubernetes. And then we're going to talk about the deployment options for Java APM agents in a containerized app kind of environment. And then we're going to do a quick demo of how you would basically start up an application that has been instrumented from the cluster agent. The cluster agent will not necessarily be covered. We will mention it, and I will send out a video of how to set that up if you are going to be doing automatic instrumentation. But then we're going to go and wrap things up and showing basically how to validate, and then if you are having some issues, what are some of the best practices and troubleshooting considerations that you should be thinking about. And then we'll wrap things up completely at the end with a Q&A via the chat, as well provide some little tidbits at the end in terms of referrals and other resources that might benefit you. It's always really important for us to have to get and have feedback. So if you have any feedback for us, we are always looking to improve ourselves, improve our content, as well. Call out if we've missed anything, whatever is on your mind in terms of content that you've seen or content that you want. Please let us know, and you can do that by using this forms link here, and we'll post this out in the chat as well in the description of this recording. So let's start out with the overview. So now, this is from, a few weeks back when we were talking about, what is application performance monitoring. I'm not going to dive into that as deep as I did last time, but again, we're focusing on the application side of the house, monitoring the transactions going in and out of those tiers and nodes, and understanding how it affects the overall application performance. And now we want to expand this into when we're dealing with containers. So again, it's part of the web stack. You are going to continue getting all of that really rich transaction data, and see the flow map, see how everything else is interacting with each other. But then you have an added layer of complexity dealing with Kubernetes. Now, this doesn't even have any of the AppD components yet, and already has so much on the page, right? It is a super efficient way of hosting your applications and technical assets nowadays, but it does get kind of complex because there's a bunch of containers within containers within containers. As we're slowly building the matrix, let's go and start talking about how do we monitor such an environment. So there's a lot of different ways to monitor it with AppDynamics. These are all the different components, and if you are using all of them, you not only get the most visibility out of what AppDynamics can provide for a Kubernetes or a containerized environment, but you also get to start to get the benefits of if you have things in place like the cluster agent and the places and components for it to write its tasks and kind of have information to work with, you can also auto instrument your applications for APM. And this will be a full version where there's other cloud versions, associated like in Azure and stuff that have maybe kind of a limited functionality by comparison of using the cluster agent. And and if you're needing help in deploying any of these components, we do have a really good video made by my friend and colleague who's also a panelist on this call, Bill Harper, and he leads you through setting up the the cluster agent as well the all the other components outside of the APM. And then this would almost kind of complete that that thought. And then I guess, while I'm here talking about my friends and colleagues as panelists, I also should introduce Mark Kerpiel, who's also our resident SME on containerized observability using both Splunk and AppDynamics. Him and Bill have been really helpful in making sure that this content is correct. And, by all means, we're always open to hearing feedback or things that could be done better. But just a quick stop and thank you to those folks for helping me out. All right, so now let's go ahead and continue on. Now, methods to instrument your application agents. You have, very similarly to what we talked about last time, you have a manual instrumentation and auto instrumentation. Typically, it's really good to start with a manual instrumentation. However, I will say when you're dealing with Kubernetes, it's so easy to set it up to do automation with the cluster agent that you might just want to jump right into it and just if you need to, you might have to bring things down and up to make sure that they are named correctly. But 9 times out of 10, what we recommend is people using the cluster agent for deployment. But you also have on the automation side people that use a deployment pipeline or also cloud options. So if you have an existing pipeline deploying the applications and it could update, maybe the agent that's baked in there, or if you have your own way of using your own init containers or Docker files and then manually associating it back to the cluster agent, that could be done. But it is so much easier to just use the cluster agent for deployment. So we're going to focus more on that today. And also, we're going to assume that you already have the cluster agent deployed. So now when we're talking about deploying the APM agent, this is an example of manually instrumenting an init container and Docker file. So now you would first build the init container with the agent in the Docker image. This is an example of one. You can pull one down from one of the repos or the .ios, or maybe you have a local repo for it. And then you would add the init container to the app deployment. As you see here, it's in the YAML format. As well, you would create another YAML file in that same directory for the config maps. And basically, you would want to set this up to be how everything is talking to AppDynamics in the controller. Is it is it a SaaS or is it on-prem, or is it what's the name of the account and the application name, etc. Anything that's going to be showing up in the controller, or also just to make sure that the agent does report to the controller, this is a very critical spot or a critical part to make sure you get right. And then also, when you're running the command for the that config map that we just made, you also need to add the config map to that same namespace. And then, like it shows here in the command, they wrote which name it was for and which technology it was built on, because you can have multiple configs in there. So you want to point it to the one that's actually going to be utilized for whatever you're deploying, and then have that coinciding name here, as you see here, e-commerce Java config, same thing here, and then you can go ahead and deploy. Now, this is the manual process. This is a bunch of you filling things out and doing that on every single deploy. Unless you're setting this up for some sort of Jenkins or other pipeline, I again highly recommend using the cluster agent to deploy it. And this is why. So first of all, you already have all of the infrastructure agents and different things checking in with what's going on in the environment. And then the cluster agent could be deploying your init container along with in the same pod as the application, so long as you have Java, .NET, or Node.js. Now, you would be able to auto instrument with that, but you can deploy other agents, that they just wouldn't be an option for auto deployment. But there are other agent options out there for you to be able to utilize. But if you are utilizing the most common code frameworks, then start using cluster agent to deploy. It's so much easier, especially at scale when you have tons of microservices. Let's pick the easy option. I would anyways. And now those init containers, I mentioned before some of the options that you have of deploying, and I'm sure you saw that there were more than just init containers listed there, but init containers are probably the most constant or the most used way of deploying, and it does it by having that agent live in the init container and associated in the same pod to the application that it would need to be run. And then that application in the container needs the Java ops for starting it, would need that updated so that it actually calls the agent that's living in the same pod. So this is kind of how it all plays together as an init container, and it calls the agent much like they would on a regular deployment that you saw a few weeks back when we were doing the deployment of a manual deployment for both Java on Windows and Linux. It's always pointing back to where's this agent jar when I'm starting up the application, so that it can stand there and be intercepting or watching what's going in and out, so then it can report to the controller, hey, we see these transactions and we see these kind of relationships with the traffic. Now, when we're auto instrumenting, there are some things that you have to fill out. Now, this is a YAML that is a part of the cluster agent. And this is basically where you define all of that same stuff that you were trying to in the config map. Basically pointing everything to the right controller, making sure that it is mapped correctly or modeled correctly. In AppDynamics, it has that entity-based monitoring where you have a business application, you have tiers, and then you have multiple nodes, usually under one of those tiers, and then you have multiple tiers within an application, and so on and so forth. To make sure that this is represented correctly, this is how you would want to make sure you're doing it. You want to make sure that you have your application name here, the information about the which controller, and also If you have any node name or tier name, or if you're going to be using environment variables, etc., you have an option to do some of that here or in the environment variables elsewhere. You also could, even if you decide to not use the cluster agent, you can still use automation by whether it's I forgot to bring this up. I'm sorry. For both manual and automated approaches, you can have, when you have the image there built already, you can leave the agent in there, but it's not always the best way to do it because it does, it doesn't always update the agent unless you have some sort of script that deploys it. Also check for the agent and it updates all of that stuff for you. That could be setting you up for more work later, where instrumenting it this way is much rather preferred and less work in the long run from what we see and the many customers that we support. So real quick demo, let's go ahead and jump over to it. Now I'm in my command prompt in my terminal since I'm on Mac, and I am going to just see what's in here. Now this is the application. We are going to assume that the Kubernetes environment already has the cluster agent deployed. It already has the infra and all of those other components that I showed you, the NetViz. Everything is already there and reporting, but there's no application monitoring. There's nothing pointing the, associating the pods within the namespace to the application that's actually being monitored. So they have everything but the application side. So let's go ahead and change that. So first of all, I want to show you what we've done with this start script. So essentially, we're going to create a deployment of Pet Clinic, and we're going to use this image, and we're going to use the deploy at the namespace Pet Clinic. It will deploy it and also if it doesn't already exist, it will create it. Now this is kind of just an example to start this application, but it kind of gives you an idea of what steps would be necessary, even if you're starting to deploy it from the cluster agent, which this is. As you notice, there's nothing in here talking about, which controller it's pointing to or anything like that. It's just making sure that it's going to the right Kubernetes resources so that everything can sync up and communicate back in the controller once I'm ready. Go ahead and get out of there. Now I'm going to go ahead and start this. Okay, so it created it deployed, and it looks like it gave me a confirmation at the end. I'm going to just go ahead and verify that I see it there. Okay, very good. I do see that. Starts with a 5.6, ends in a 7.7V. We'll reference that back in the controller and make sure that they're communicating correctly. Don't pay any mind to this. I just need to run a quick script to make sure there's traffic. Very good. And now let's go ahead and jump into the controller. So now I'm at the basic view of the controller, and I have a couple different ways I can choose to go. Since it's starting to come into the application side of things, but there was some established monitoring already on the infrastructure side, I'm going to go ahead and start over on the infrastructure side, and we're going to go into clusters. We're going to jump into this cluster, and now and this is the cluster where I'm deployed. And now let's go ahead and look at the namespace. All right, Pet Clinic. This is the one that my script created when it was deploying the application. And, this is probably where the cluster agent lives, doing the deployment steps necessary in the background. And now let's go ahead and go look at the pods. And it's Pet Clinic. So I'm going to go here and go ahead and double click on it. Let's go ahead and just I don't see what I need. Let me make sure I'm still getting traffic. Does seem like everything's working. It might need a run for a little bit, but typically what I'm trying to show you is underneath this namespace, it actually tells you which APM or which application it's associated with. I think I killed before the demo, I killed the namespace, so it made it disassociate. After it's running for a while, it will associate again, and there will be a link right here so that I can just jump right into the application tier, which I'm manually going to have to go to right now because it's not coming in. Unless maybe I just need a refresh or, yeah, we spent a lot of time here. So let's just go ahead and start jumping back over. Go to applications. And then we're reporting into Pet Clinic Kubernetes. And now you can see those tiers checking in. So something's not right here. Well, now I'm kind of tempted to just stop and restart it. Hmm. What is going on here? Well, this one I expect because, okay, this one though. Well, it does seem like it's there. I do see it. So why is it not doing what it should? Sorry, it's a little embarrassing to have this on a live event happen. I'm not entirely sure what happened. But as we all know, we're IT professionals, and sometimes, right when someone's looking, something doesn't want to work right. Like when you go to the uh, go to the mechanic and say something's not right, and then they are not able to find it because it stopped making the noise by the time you got there. So, um, anyways, let me see if I can just look up some past past information so I can at least show you what. Oh, okay. Seems like some information starting to come in. That's good. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a peek real quick. So now this is technically the view that it would bring me to if I were to click on that link that I showed from the cluster agent side under servers. And if I go open up the pod information, it should have a link there saying go over to the node, and it'll bring me right to whatever node it is in here. Excuse me. So that is validation that it is working. And now let's go ahead and jump back over to the slides. Sorry for the speed bumps there. We'll maybe need to have another follow-up video, that is just available with a little bit more information showing. All right, anyways, so best practices and other considerations. So now Splunk AppDynamics, I'm sure you guys are all aware and using it often. So there's a lot going on, but knowing what's executing when, it kind of helps us all really understand how it all plays together. So when you're doing a auto deployment, or actually when you're doing any sort of deployment with it, the deployment will be in the I'm sorry, with the cluster agent. The cluster agent has that information where you fill it in about the spec, and that spec is basically right here, where it calls out which applications are instrumented, what controller they're going to speak to, etc., which namespaces they're loaded into, all of this good stuff. So now that we have that all set up, what's actually going to happen? So they're going to start the deployment. A new replica set's going to be initialized. The init container is going to start. The Java agent is going to be pulled and copied into that shared volume. And then the init container will die, and then start the main container with that already replicated into it. The Java agent will already be in there. And then the Java agent will register to the controller once the application starts, and then the application will start reporting into the controller. So kind of a convoluted way of explaining it, but knowing the order of operations will sometimes help. A lot of the DevOps folks understand, where, if something's failing and you don't know where, if you know what steps it's taking, you can start diagnosing which part of the step it's failing at. Obviously logs, obviously looking at the prompt and what's coming out, or whatever startup script you have will be beneficial. But understanding how that auto instrumentation is actually happening will actually benefit you a lot in diagnosing things later if you need to. So there's also the wider impact of making sure that you have not just the instrumentation for APM. You also want to start looking at how to where you want the application monitoring to be happening from. If you have multiple layers happening, from Docker and Kubernetes, or whatever product you guys are expecting to use, if there's lots of layers in there, you have to start understanding which cluster agents are going to be around there, and which kind of spec information are you going to put in there. So because you're going to instrument basically your applications from that cluster agent, making sure that all of the the resources and components of AppD are there so that those metrics will be picked up becomes very important, and it becomes important to also strategize where things are going to be in which containers and grouped with what. Obviously, having the full deployment, helps you make sure that you don't have anything missed. You don't want to have a missed opportunity of monitoring where AppDynamics might be saying what exactly is going on, and if you don't have the right feature turned on, or if it's not tuned correctly, you might not be able to actually get actionable data, meaning getting data in there and, oh, there's something wrong. Okay, well, what is it? What what was going on when it started? Things that would help you start to diagnose and troubleshoot, real world situations and outages. It becomes very important to make sure that you have everything set up right. And like I said, I will definitely have a video showing you how to set up that cluster agent, other components outside of APM, to kind of complement this one. And then, what kind of information would you expect? Now, we're not really talking deeply about cluster agent on this particular video as part of this session, but I do want to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that you can be looking at if you do have the cluster agent and all the components set up. You can be looking at the namespaces and figuring out if there's any broken service endpoints, or if any pod health is lacking. If you have the InfraViz agent deployed, you can also track the CPU and memory, and basically the resource utilization of the Kubernetes resources. Very cool, and obviously very important to understand overall performance. Is the application affecting the hardware, or is the hardware affecting the application? With things like AppDynamics in place, you can start to understand that relationship. And then there's some more best practices in dealing with the instrumentation of a Kubernetes environment. You want to really make sure that you do these things in an order. If you are using the auto instrumentation, make sure that you have deleted any existing secrets from your manual attempts. Make sure that you create a new authentication secret, and then also make sure that you config the init container. You set your environment variables depending on where you're going to be setting that up. And then also, we always recommend the auto instrumentation. It is just hugely important, and it works so well that if you have a large scale deployment, it's just one less thing on your plate, one less thing to bug the DevOps team to set up pipelines for, etc. And also, less things to maintain, which is ultimately what you want, as long as things are being maintained properly, right? Some other best practices, there are other options of doing it. Leveraging the init containers definitely has its benefits, and we've noticed that it seems to be the most stable with everybody. There are tons of options though. You can, and everybody likes their own thing or does things differently, and that's fine. But with the init container, you also have the option of turning on auto instrumentation later with the cluster agent, and it won't be that far off from doing it manually if you started out with manual init containers somehow. And then there's also make sure that you have the access configuration and keys through Kubernetes, and make sure that those config maps and secrets are taken seriously. Secrets are more secure, obviously, than having a config map. But if you do need a config map, that is an option there. And then when you have it set up for your auto deployment, it'll share agent artifacts across using the same storage. And if it's using the same storage or the same volume, it's not having to blow up every container. It's got its own separate volume that is shared, and things are writing logs to, so it'll be easier for diagnosis, etc. It is a much better practice to do it that way than have to deal with going into each individual pod, um, you know, for those artifacts, or to double check things, etc. So definitely a good best practice for for auto deployment, and then also make sure that you're using the Java ops for your environment variable. Um, you know, the make sure that you have the environment variable explaining where the agent is, so that it's always picked up. Even if you don't use environment variables for everything else, at least knowing where the agent is will keep it consistent. If you have multiple applications deploying from one place, or from the on the same cluster, and that cluster agent is there doing the deployments for multiple applications, you can do that. You would just define that in that YAML, the cluster agent, .yaml. It'll actually have all the information in there for all of the apps that it's going to be deploying for, and you would be able to make sure that change the name and any specifics you're going to have. But if nothing else, having the actual location of the agent as an environment variable is extremely good and important. All right. So now, what if you're having some difficulties like I was before, right? You want to make sure that you see all of the pod failures, the restarts, and everything. But if you don't see things coming in, make sure that the pod isn't already there, or if it is, it's duplicated. Or sometimes you just got to make sure that you have traffic going to it, or you're not going to see all of the information you need. Agent registration issues are more in the realm of making sure that not only that the agent or the pod, or the things in the containers can reach the controller, but also that it's able to authenticate with the credentials that it has. So agent registration issues are common. You can always go into the location of the logs where the agent lives, and find the right pod name within that log directory, and find out, or it sees it as a host name, so find that correct host name. Make sure that it has what it needs to connect to the controller. Also, make sure that you have the right dependencies in place. So make sure, whether it's a config map, secrets, service endpoints, make sure that all of your components are intertwined and connected and talking to each other. Make sure that you have the right information in the right places. There is some things you can play with in terms of where to place that information. So it does kind of become a little subjective in a way, but the secrets are obviously going to be the most secure. So I'll try to pick the most secure option every time. I would recommend anyways. And then container image problems. So sometimes the image is just having issues, or sometimes the pod can't, or the whatever's doing the deployment can't get out to where that image is. So always make sure that the location is accessible, as well it has a good and up-to-date image, especially if you are if you're running anything and you're running old stuff. Obviously you're putting yourself and the company at risk. So obviously make sure you have newer images, and that you keep your resources up to date, and you are able to make sure that you're able to use the deployment strategy that you have set in place. So these are some of the common traps and pitfalls but it's usually, you got to jump between the various places that you have to update and make sure all the right information's in there. And then, make sure that, the namespace is loaded, that has all of the components on there. That'll be covered more um, in the video that I send, loading up the actual cluster agent, other components. But obviously, everything's got to be talking to each other. You got to have access to things. The agent has to be able to register with the controller. And if you run into deployment failures, make sure that you're looking at the logs, reading messages that pop up from your load script or your start script, etc. Whatever the case may be, just, stick with it. It's worth it. And it's usually pretty straightforward. It's something silly, usually like a misspelling or wrong namespace that's not instrumented, silly things like that. So just look around for that. All right. So now with the last 14 minutes, I would like to spend some time with you all. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop them into the chat now, and I will start answering them for you. Beyond that, it would be great if you guys have some resources to get to, if need. Obviously, there's a lot of good information on the community. There's a lot of good information, which the community for Cisco, all of the information that used to be on AppDynamics community first got moved over to the community on Cisco, and now it's getting rehomed over at the Splunk.com site. Since we are now under the greater Splunk, monitoring suite umbrella, and they are owned by Cisco, but they are a very strong product in the market, and Splunk AppDynamics is getting largely integrated in with Splunk. So definitely check out their community. All of our discussions and past articles are going to be over there. This YouTube channel is going to be your best resource for a lot of on-demand content for the most current stuff going on. We focus on observability, so if that is your focus as well, then come check us out. Beyond just coming to these live events. And then always, if you're trying to get certified, if you're trying to, build your resume, get into the Cisco U. Cisco University has a lot of on-demand content. It also, they also run the certification tests for Splunk AppDynamics and, all sorts of really powerful and wonderful, Cisco products. There's Thousand Eyes, obviously the Splunk AppDynamics. Splunk is still on the Splunk side more of things. They still have their own university set up for now. But there will be more integrations of that later. But then if you're interested in Catalyst or security or, any of the other, wonderful things that Cisco's doing and playing with, feel free to go ahead and check that out. I don't see that any questions have come through, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for today, and probably start editing this recording so that I can go and publish it for everybody. So without taking up more of your time, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you got a lot of value out of this session. See you next time.
Great job, Chris.